The McHenry County Housing Authority would like to welcome you to the Project-Based Voucher Program Briefing. The purpose of this briefing is to provide you with all the information that you will need to maintain your good standing while you are participating in the Project-Based Voucher Program. All applicants and household members who are 18 years of age or older should listen to or attend this program briefing. So we're going to start by talking about how are project-based vouchers different from tenant-based vouchers. So under the tenant-based Housing Choice Voucher Program, or what most people think of as the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, the Housing Authority would issue an eligible family a voucher. That family would take that voucher out into the private rental market and select a unit of their choosing from a private landlord. If the family moves out of that unit, the family would be given a voucher to move, the contract with the owner would end, and the family could move to another unit of their choosing from a private landlord. Under the project-based voucher program, the Housing Authority will enter into a housing assistance payments contract with a specific owner for a specific number of units for a specific number of years. The Housing Authority will maintain a site-based waiting list for that complex or project, and we will refer families from our waiting list to the owner to fill vacancies as they become available. Because the assistance is tied to the unit, if a family moves from their project-based voucher unit, they do not take the assistance with them because the assistance is given to the apartment and not to the family. But under the regulations of the project-based voucher program, HUD says that after you have lived in your project-based voucher unit for 1 full year, you can request a tenant-based voucher to move from your unit if you would like to. If the Housing Authority has a voucher available, we would issue a voucher to you, and you could go out into the private rental market and find a unit of your choosing to rent from a private landlord. But if, after you have lived in your project-based voucher unit for 1 full year and you request a tenant-based voucher to move, the Housing Authority may be using all of our voucher assistance. If we cannot issue you a voucher because we are using all of the voucher assistance we have available, you would have to continue living in your project-based voucher unit until such time that a voucher is available. So the project-based voucher program is a 3-way partnership. That partnership exists between the family, the landlord, and the Housing Authority. So each party has equal responsibility to make sure that the program runs smoothly. So we're going to start by talking about the family responsibilities and obligations under the project-based voucher program. In order to receive assistance, or in order to continue receiving assistance on this program, the family must actively participate. So there'll be appointments that you'll be required to attend. There'll be consent forms and verification forms that you'll be required to sign. There'll be documents that you'll be required to turn in. So we're going to talk about what your family responsibilities and obligations are by coming on a program like this. So responsibilities of the family include providing the Housing Authority with complete and accurate information regarding who's living with you, your income, your assets, and any sort of allowable deductions. The family must cooperate by attending all appointments scheduled by the Housing Authority and the apartment complex. And in the beginning, there can be a lot of appointments. So you'll have to meet with the apartment complex to be screened for suitability. You'll have to meet with your caseworker here at the Housing Authority to sign consent forms and turn in documentation. Once you are on the program, we require that you attend an annual appointment at least once a year to re-sign all the necessary papers and to submit updated documents. But we also require that if your family's income changes, for the better or for the worse, you have to report all income changes in writing within 10 days of the change taking place. An appointment might be required then as well, because we will adjust your rent portion up or down to reflect what's actually happening with your family's income. The family must take responsibility for the care of their unit, including but not limited to clean food prep areas and no accumulated trash or rubbish in or around your rental unit. The family must comply with the terms of the lease that you'll sign with the landlord, and the family must comply with the regulations of the project-based voucher program. So we're going to talk about what HUD says your family obligations are while you are receiving assistance under the project-based voucher program. So HUD states that any family participating in the project-based voucher program of the Housing Authority must follow the rules listed below in order to continue to receive housing assistance under the program. Any information the family supplies must be true and complete. So the family must supply any information that the Housing Authority or HUD determines to be necessary for administration of the program. This will include your birth certificate, social security card, IDs for adults. You will supply documentation of your income and your assets and any sort of allowable deductions. So the family must supply any information requested by the Housing Authority or HUD for use in regularly scheduled reexamination or interim reexamination of family income and composition. So whenever you have an appointment with the Housing Authority, we're going to want to see about 3 months of everything having to do with your financial life. So if you're not great about saving paperwork, starting now, moving forward, you're going to want to start to save 3 months of everything having to do with your income. So documentation of employment wages, child support, social security, SSI, alimony, pensions, work for cash. So if you're a handy person, shoveling snow, mowing lawns, doing hair, nails, driving for Uber or Lyft or Grubhub, if you are doing multi-level marketing like selling Avon or Mary Kay, make sure to save documentation of all of your income. You'll also want to save documentation of your assets. So checking accounts, savings account statements, documentation of stocks, bonds, annuities, money market funds, retirement accounts. You'll want to save 3 months worth of documentation of your deductions. So if we're giving you credit for out-of-pocket medical expenses or child care expenses, save 3 months worth of that documentation as well. So whenever you have an appointment scheduled with the Housing Authority, you'll want to be able to provide 3 months worth of your income, asset, and deduction information. The family must disclose and verify social security numbers and sign and submit consent forms for obtaining information. So when you have an appointment with the Housing Authority, you will provide your original documentation. We will copy it and return it to you. But we will also have you sign consent forms that we will send off to third parties to verify what you've told us. Sometimes it's going to feel like double and triple documentation, but that's just the way that HUD requires it to be. The family must supply any information requested by the Housing Authority to verify that the family is living in the unit or information related to family absence from the unit. So the day that you sign the lease and you come on this program, you should update your address everywhere to reflect that new unit's address. You should do a change of address at the post office, tell your employer that you've moved, tell your bank you've moved, tell public aid that you've moved. You need to register your children to school from your assisted unit's address. So if requested, all documentation should show that you and every member of your assisted family are living in that unit. The family has to promptly notify the Housing Authority in writing when the family is away from the unit for an extended period of time in accordance with our policies. So that both HUD and the Housing Authority have policies regarding how long someone can be absent from a unit and have us still pay rent. HUD frowns on us on paying on empty units. So it depends on who is gone somewhere, where they have gone, and how long they will be gone for. All of that would factor into how we would treat the situation. We don't expect you to know all the ins and outs of those rules, but what we do expect is that if someone that we believe is living with you, including yourself, is away from the unit for several weeks or more, you must let the Housing Authority know about that absence right away, and then provide documentation to show where that person has gone and when they will be returning to the unit. The family must allow the Housing Authority to inspect the unit at a reasonable time and after a reasonable notice. So we will do an inspection of your unit before you move in to make sure that it meets housing quality standards. But we'll also do an annual inspection every year to make sure that the unit continues to meet housing quality standards. So we set up inspections with the landlord. the landlord gets a letter several weeks before we're due to come out, letting them know that we'll be there at a specific date and time to do an inspection. It is the landlord's responsibility to let the tenants know at least 24 hours in advance that we are coming out to do an inspection. And the family must notify the housing authority and the owner in writing before moving out of the unit or terminating the lease. Remember, after you have lived in your project-based voucher unit for 1 full year, you can request a tenant-based voucher to move. And if a voucher is available, we will issue you a voucher to move. But if after you have lived in your project-based voucher unit for 1 full year and you request a voucher to move, if the housing authority is using all of our voucher assistance, you would have to continue living in your project-based voucher unit until such time that a voucher is available. But if you would like to move from your unit, you must notify the housing authority and the owner in writing before you move out or before you terminate your lease. So the use of the residence must be the family's primary and only residence. HUD does not want us paying rent on your weekend or your summer home. So you and every member of your assisted family should live in that unit full-time. The family must promptly notify the housing authority in writing about the birth, adoption, or court-awarded custody of a child. So you don't need housing authority permission to have a baby. We'd just like for you to let us know that you've had a baby, and then provide the birth certificate and the social security card. Same with if you have children added to your household through adoption or court-awarded custody, you will have to provide the children's birth certificates and social security cards. The family can request housing authority written approval to add any other family member as an occupant to the unit. So this program is for families. HUD does not allow roommates on the program, but if you have another adult family member that you would like to have live with you for the long term, it is possible to add other family members to your assistance. That adult family member would have to complete and pass a criminal background check. They'd have to view or attend this briefing. They would have to get written permission from the landlord to be added to your assisted home. They'd have to attend an appointment with you and your caseworker to turn in documents and sign consent forms. And only after all of those steps have been taken should that new family member move in. They should not move in before everything has been completed. The family must promptly notify the housing authority in writing if any family member is no longer living in the unit. So if someone that we believe is living with you moves out, you have to let us know about that absence right away, and then provide documentation to show where that person has gone. The family must give the housing authority a copy of any owner eviction notices. So you're not protected by being on this program from being evicted. If you repeatedly violate terms of your lease, your landlord may evict you. In Illinois, an eviction is a court process. The landlord would have to take you to court, and a judge would have to find cause for the eviction. But if you were evicted through the courts, then you would lose your housing assistance. The family must pay utility bills and provide and maintain any appliances the landlord is not required to provide under the lease. So in almost all circumstances, the family will have some utility bills that they are responsible for paying. If the landlord tells you that you were responsible for paying the gas and the electric in the unit, the day that you sign the lease, you have to contact the gas and the electric company and get those utilities turned on in the name of an adult who is living in the assisted home. So they can't be on in your mama's name who's not living with you. They can't be on in your 5-year-old's name who is living with you. The utilities must be turned on in the name of an adult who is living in the assisted home. And if you bring in an appliance the landlord has not provided, such as a washer or a dryer, sometimes a dishwasher, then you have to keep that appliance in proper working order. Whenever we go out to do an inspection, everything that's there has to work, even if it's yours. So the family must submit evidence of citizenship or eligible immigration status if they are seeking assistance. Families in which all members are U.S. citizens or have eligible immigration status are eligible for full assistance. A mixed family, and in which at least one member is a U.S. citizen or has eligible immigration status, and at least one member does not contend to have immigration status, that family is eligible for prorated assistance. The family, including each assisted family member, must not own or have any interest in the unit. So we can't help pay rent on a unit that you own by yourself or jointly with another person. Some housing authorities do have home ownership programs, but unfortunately, we do not. The family cannot commit any serious or repeated violations of the lease because, again, you may be evicted if you repeatedly violate terms of your lease. You also might not be in good standing to get a voucher to move from your unit if your landlord has documented that you have repeatedly violated terms of your lease. The family cannot commit fraud, bribery, or any other corrupt or criminal act in connection with the program. The family cannot engage in drug-related criminal activity, violent criminal activity, or any other criminal activity that threatens the health, safety, or right to peaceful enjoyment of the premises. So we do background checks on all family members 17 years of age or older before they come on the program, but we also do background checks every year once you're on the program. And we look back 4 years. So in the previous 4 years, you can't have been found guilty of or pled guilty to any sort of drug-related criminal activity, any sort of violent criminal activity. You can't have any member of your assisted family that's required to register as a sex offender for life in any of the 50 states. You can't have any member of your assisted family that's ever been found guilty of producing methamphetamines in HUD-assisted housing. That's also an automatic ban for life. The family cannot sublease the unit, meaning that you can't move out and let someone else move in and accept the assistance on your behalf. You can't let the unit or rent a room to someone. You can't assign the lease to another person, and you can't transfer the assistance to another unit because under the project-based voucher program, we are assisting a specific unit in a specific apartment complex. The family cannot receive project-based voucher assistance while receiving another housing subsidy for the same or for a different unit under any federal, state, or local housing program. So you can't have 2 rental assistance programs going on at the same time. Oftentimes, this can be an issue when a family is already living in privately HUD-funded housing. Here in McHenry County, we have different apartment complexes that have their own private HUD funding. So if you were living in a privately HUD-funded unit and wanted to come on the project-based voucher program for, let's say, May 1st, your lease at your privately HUD-funded unit would have to end April 30th for us to help you May 1st. There shouldn't even be 1 day of overlap. This can also sometimes be an issue when there's children. If the children's parents are not together and each parent lives in their own privately HUD-funded unit, the children can only be claimed as living in one household. They can't be claimed as living in both. And the family cannot damage the unit or premises or permit any guest to damage the unit or premises because you will be financially responsible for all damage claims assessed to the unit. The family cannot receive project-based voucher assistance while residing in a unit owned by a parent, child, grandparent, grandchild, sister, or brother of any member of the family, unless the housing authority has determined that approving that unit would be a reasonable accommodation for a family member who is disabled. But unless we've approved it as a reasonable accommodation, we cannot allow you to rent from a family member. And the family cannot engage in abuse of alcohol in a way that threatens the health, safety, or right to peaceful enjoyment of the premises. So next, we will briefly talk about housing discrimination and lead-based paint. In your briefing packet, you will find pamphlets on both of these topics. So in confronting housing discrimination, it is illegal to deny housing to anyone on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, familial status, or disability. If you believe that you have been discriminated against, you can contact your housing authority representative and we can assist you in completing a housing discrimination complaint form that's been included in your packet. So you're more than welcome to hire a private lawyer if you feel that you've been discriminated against, but you can also hire HUD and they will help you for free. The next pamphlet is called Protecting Your Family from Lead in Your Home. Lead-based paint can be found in units that were built before 1978, and as lead-based paint breaks down, chipping, peeling, cracking, chalking, deteriorated paint can pose a health hazard for yourself and your family. I would encourage you to carefully read the pamphlet Protecting Your Family from Lead in Your Home so you're aware of the dangers of lead-based. Reasonable accommodations. The McHenry County Housing Authority must not discriminate against any person with a disability. Applicants and residents can request a reasonable accommodation at any time, from the application process through the termination process to those that have a qualified disability. So a reasonable accommodation is a modification or change a housing authority can make to a policy or a procedure that would allow an otherwise qualified applicant or a participant to take full advantage of one of our programs. So examples of a reasonable accommodation may be permitting an application or re-exam to be completed by mail for someone who is medically homebound. We could approve the need for a live-in aide if someone's doctor says that they require a 24-hour live-in care attendant. We could permit an authorized designee or advocate to participate in any of the meetings a client has here at the Housing Authority to help that person successfully complete those meetings. So these are all some examples of a reasonable accommodation the Housing Authority could approve for an individual who is disabled. So the head of the household must advise the Housing Authority of all persons who are residing in the unit. If there's going to be an increase in your family composition or who's living with you, other than childbirth, that change must be approved by the Housing Authority before the person moves in. So if you would like to add another adult family member to your assistance, I would encourage you to start the process about 2 months before you want that person to move in. That gives you plenty of time to have that person complete a criminal background check form, get written permission from the landlord sent in saying that person can move in, have the person attend this briefing or orientation, and get a meeting set up with your caseworker for you and your new family member to sign consent forms and turn in documentation. And also please remember that any household member that is absent from the unit for several weeks or more, it must be reported to the Housing Authority timely. So some common violations of housing assistance may include non-payment or late rent payment. So this is not the free rent program. In almost all circumstances, the family will have a portion of the rent that they are responsible for paying on time, in full, every month, directly to the landlord. If in your lease it says there are penalties for paying your rent late, then you would be subject to those late penalties. Not paying utilities can also sometimes be a common violation. Again, if your landlord indicates that you are responsible for paying certain utilities such as gas or electric, the day that you sign the lease, you have to get the gas and the electric service turned on in the name of an adult who is living in the assisted home. And every month as the bills come in, you have to pay them and keep them current. If your utilities get shut off for non-payment, you would lose your housing assistance. So please make sure to keep your utilities on and in good standing. When you are receiving a Housing Choice Voucher assistance, you are still more than welcome and encouraged to apply every year for LIHEAP. LIHEAP is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. We offer that program out of our office here at the McHenry County Housing Authority. It is a seasonal program that generally starts in late fall, normally October, runs through the winter, and ends at the end of May. And for income-eligible households, the LIHEAP program can put money directly towards your utility bills. But that again being said, you are responsible for keeping your utilities on and in good standing. An unauthorized person is anyone that you allow to stay in your home for more than 14 days per year that is not part of your assistance. It would also be anyone that you knowingly allow to use your address for any purpose. So you cannot knowingly allow someone to use your address to receive mail, put in an ID or an application, to register children to school from your assisted unit's address, to be bailed or bonded out of jail or prison to your home. So none of those things can happen. The only real exception to the unauthorized persons rule in our administrative plan is in regards to children. So if you are a parent and you share joint custody of a minor child or minor children, but you are not the residential parent or they do not live with you more than 50% of the time, then those children would not be added to your assisted home. But they could come and stay with you every weekend, all summer long. It says up to about 182 days a year, or essentially half the time. They would have to be on your lease as a temporary occupant, and the housing authority and your landlord would have to be aware of the situation. But other than for minor children that you share joint custody of, that's really the only exception to the unauthorized persons rule in our administrative plan. Under reporting of income, the family is required to report all sources of income for every member of the family, including minor children. If the family fails to report an income increase in writing within 10 days of the change taking place, then the family will be subject to a repayment agreement. So HUD requires that the housing authority calculate what the family should have been paying in rent had they reported that change timely, and then that family owes us the difference in that money back. So tenant damages will be the family's financial responsibility to pay for. On this program, you will be a renter. So in almost all circumstances, the housing authority would assign responsibility to the landlord or the owner to make repairs to the unit. But if the landlord determines that you have caused damage above and beyond normal wear and tear and subject to wording in your lease, the landlord may be able to charge you for making repairs. So drug activity is not allowed on the program. The housing authority does do criminal background checks every year, and we look back to see if in the previous 4 years you have been found guilty of or pled guilty to any sort of drug-related criminal activity. But we let the courts decide who is pleading guilty or who is being found guilty of drug-related criminal activity. But your landlord is well within their legal rights to try to evict you from the unit for the mere idea that drugs are taking place. So if your landlord sees something, if they smell something, if you are arrested on the property for drugs, your landlord may try to evict you. And if you are evicted through the courts, then you would lose your housing voucher. So threatening behavior towards housing authority staff or neighbors is not tolerated. Subleasing is not allowed, again, meaning that you can't move out and let someone else move in and accept the assistance on your behalf. And you can't make side payments to a landlord. Side payments is when a landlord asks for extra rent or a tenant offers to pay extra rent. The housing authority will always determine what your portion of the rent is, and you should never pay any additional. Next, we are going to talk about the landlord and owner responsibilities under the project. So the landlord is responsible for approving the family that they would like to rent to. By giving a family a voucher, the housing authority is not saying that you will be a good tenant. We are just saying that you are income eligible for our rental assistance. So landlords are strongly encouraged to do any sort of reference checks, background checks, credit checks, and screen applicants just as they would any other family who is interested in renting a unit from them. So you may be asked to complete an application. There may be an application fee that you're expected to pay, and the property owner should check on your rental history, credit history, and generally screen you to determine if you would be a good renter. So the landlord must comply with all fair housing laws and not discriminate against any family. The landlord has to maintain the unit by making necessary repairs in a timely fashion. And by timely, we generally mean at least 30 days. So there are some repairs that we would consider 24-hour emergency repairs. They might include no heat in the dead of winter, no running water in your unit, not a single working toilet in your house. Those would all be 24-hour emergency repairs. But for general maintenance concerns, the housing authority would give your landlord at least 30 days to make the repair, and we would expect that you would do the same. The landlord must comply with the terms of the housing assistance payments contract that they sign with us, and the landlord will collect the rent due from the family and otherwise enforce all the provisions of the lease. So the owner must maintain the unit in accordance with housing quality standards, and the housing authority cannot make payments for a unit that fails to meet housing quality standards, meaning that we cannot pay rent on a unit that fails inspection. So let's say that we go out to do your annual inspection and your unit fails for just a couple general maintenance concerns. We would send the landlord a letter, and you would get a copy of the letter. The letter would indicate the date that we came out to do the inspection, and we would list everything that failed the inspection. We would give a time frame to the landlord to make the repairs. Again, for general maintenance concerns, we would give them at least 30 days. But let's say that 30 days comes and goes. Nobody calls us to say the repairs have been done. Maybe they haven't been done. After the time frame that we have given has passed, we will start to abate or not pay our portion of the rent. We will abate a landlord's rent for 30 days. While under abatement, the landlord still has the opportunity to make the repair, have us come out and pass the unit. And if it does pass, we will begin to pay again. But if while under abatement, the landlord does not make the repair or the unit does not pass the inspection, after 30 days of abating, we will cancel the contract for that unit and the family will be given a voucher to move. That is if it was a landlord responsibility to make the repair. If our inspector determined that it was tenant-caused damages and assigned responsibility to you to make the repair, the same types of rules apply. You would be given a time frame for making the repair. If you did not make the repair during that time frame or the unit does not pass the inspection, we would send you and your landlord a 30-day notice of termination, saying that because of this housing quality standards failure, in 30 days' time, we're going to terminate your housing assistance. Under a 30-day notice of termination, you still have the opportunity to make the repair and have us come out and pass the unit. And if it does pass, you'll maintain your good standing. But while under a 30-day notice of termination, if the unit doesn't pass the inspection or you do not make the repair, after 30 days, we will cancel your housing assistance because ultimately we cannot pay rent for a unit that fails an inspection. So next we're going to talk about how we calculate your eligibility and your level of assistance. These are some HUD terms that you might hear your caseworker talk about or that you might see on your paperwork. HAP stands for Housing Assistance Payment. That is our portion of the rent that we send to your landlord every month. The payment standard is an amount that we use to calculate our portion of the rent. It is based on HUD's fair market rent, which is a rent limit determined annually by HUD. The payment standard is the maximum amount of rental assistance that HUD is willing to give you every month in rent. When someone asks, what is my voucher worth? They are asking, what is the payment standard? When determining whether or not a unit will work for the program or will be affordable for a family, we look at what is called the gross rent, which is the asking rent plus a utility allowance. A utility allowance is the housing authority's best estimate of how much you will pay in utility bills based off what utilities you are responsible for and if those utilities are runoff gas or electric. So for an example, let's say that you are a single person coming on the program and you have a 1-bedroom voucher. You go out and you find a 1-bedroom apartment that you would like to rent. The landlord tells you that the asking rent for the unit is $850 a month. You ask the landlord, what utilities do I have to pay? The landlord says that you have to pay electric for your heating, electric for your hot water heating, electric for your general light bill, and electric for your cooking. We would say on average it would cost you about $150 a month to keep your ComEd bill or your electric bill current every month, all 12 months of the year. So the gross rent for that unit would be the asking rent of $850 a month plus a utility allowance of $150 a month for a gross rent of $1,000. When we're determining what your portion of the rent is going to be, we look at the gross income for every member of the family, including children. And we estimate that gross income out to try to get a gross annual income. So again, let's say that you're a single person coming on the program and you receive Social Security income. And before any taxes or deductions of any kind are taken out of your Social Security, you are entitled to $1,000 a month. We would then say that your gross annual income is $12,000 a year. From your gross annual income, we will take away any sort of allowances or deductions that you are entitled to under the program to get to your adjusted annual income, or annual income after deductions. We divide that number by 12 to get your monthly adjusted income, and then everyone will pay 30% of their monthly adjusted income towards rent and utilities. So 30% of your monthly adjusted income is known as your total tenant payment, or your TTP. And again, that amount is split between rent and utilities. So let's go back to the example where the asking rent for the unit was $850 a month, and we expect that you will pay about $150 a month towards your ComEd bill every month. We would say if we calculate 30% of your family's monthly adjusted income to be $400 a month, you would not pay $400 a month in rent. Instead, you would pay $250, because we'd expect that you would apply that other $150 towards your ComEd bill every month. We reduce your rent portion by the utility allowance amount to give you indirect help to keep your utilities current. So what size unit will your family be eligible for under the project-based voucher program? In general, in a one-bedroom, there must be at least one person, and generally a maximum of two. For a two-bedroom, there must be at least two people and no more than four. And in a three-bedroom, there must be at least three people, but no more than six. This slide goes over the McHenry County Housing Authority's subsidy standards and how your housing specialist will determine what unit size you are eligible for based on who is living with you, their ages, sexes, and relationships to each other. So it is important to remember that the family must report all household income for every member of the family, including minor children. Examples of income include wages. This would include your normal 9-to-5 job where you clock in, you clock out, you get a check at the end of the week. But it also would be anything that you can do for cash income or self-employment income. This might include driving for Uber or Grubhub, doing multi-level marketing like selling for Avon, Mary Kay, Herbalife. It might also include working for cash, being a handy person, babysitting, shoveling snow, mowing lawns, doing hair or nails, all sorts of wage income for every member of the family must be documented and reported to the Housing Authority. Other examples of income include unemployment, TANF money, which is temporary assistance for needy families. It's a cash grant from public aid. Supplemental security income and all Social Security benefits, child support, alimony, pensions, annuities, income from assets, contributions, gifts, and other support. Those last few tend to confuse people sometimes. So HUD says that any sort of financial assistance given directly to a family or paid on behalf of a family count as income for a family. So if someone outside of your assisted household, like a friend, a relative, a neighbor, a significant other, another social service agency, is helping pay for things like your car payment, car insurance, cell phone bill, cable bill, or is giving you financial assistance or money every month to help you get by, that must be reported and documented and counted as income for the family. The family must report all household assets for every member of the family, including minor children. Examples of assets would include equity in real property or real estate holdings, amounts in checking accounts or savings accounts, stocks, bonds, money market funds, retirement savings of any kind, life insurance policies, certificates of deposit, lump sum inheritances, lottery winnings, insurance settlements, and any assets that you've disposed of for less than their fair market value during the 2 years preceding that certification. So depending on your family type, HUD would like to give you adjustments or deductions to your gross annual income. And HUD would like to try to define your family in one of two ways. So HUD would define a dependent as anyone who is under the age of 18, other than the head of household, spouse, or co-head. HUD would also define a dependent as anyone who is a full-time student, 18 years of age or older, other than the head of household, spouse, or co-head. HUD would also define a dependent as any household member who has a disability other than the head of household, spouse, or co-head. So the head of household, spouse, or co-head can never be considered a dependent. HUD would define an elderly family where the head of household, spouse, or co-head is either 62 years of age or older or is a person with a disability. So if HUD has defined your family as elderly, meaning that the head of household, spouse, or co-head is either 62 years of age or older, or is a person who is disabled, then we can give you allowable medical expenses as a deduction to gross annual income. An allowable medical expense is anything the family pays for medical out of pocket that is unreimbursed that can generally be expected to repeat. So this could include your Medicare premium, your supplemental health insurance premiums, doctor co-pays, prescription co-pays, documented mileage to and from a doctor or a hospital. All of that could be an allowable medical expense. We can allow child care expenses for children who are 12 or younger if it will enable a family member to work or to attend school. And we can also allow handicap assistance expenses for attendant care or auxiliary apparatus for a disabled family member if it permits another family member to work. So who pays what in the project-based voucher program? The family will pay 30% of their monthly adjusted income towards rent and utilities, and the housing authority will pay the remainder. So to recap, the family contribution to the rent payment equals 30% of your monthly adjusted income minus the utility allowance amount equals your. The housing authority will give you the utility allowance based on the actual unit size you are renting under the project-based voucher program. If you stay in your same unit year after year after year, you might find that your utility allowance number changes slightly. And that's because HUD requires the housing authority review every year and update as necessary the utility allowance schedule to try to keep pace with the actual cost of utilities. The security deposit for the unit will be the family's responsibility to pay. Unfortunately, this program does not come with assistance for security deposit. You may also have to pay a deposit to get utilities turned on in your name if you have a bad history with the utility company, if you have poor credit or no credit. So the housing authority will provide your family with assistance as long as the rent remains reasonable for the area, as long as your unit continues to meet housing quality standards, as long as your family remains eligible for assistance, as long as you reside in the unit full-time, and as long as the owner is in compliance with the housing assistance payments contract that they sign with us. Remember, it is required that you pay your portion of the rent on time, in full, every month. You are also required to pay your utilities on time each and every month. And you will not be permitted to move with assistance if your rent is not paid, your utilities are not paid, or the unit is damaged. So the housing authority will always determine final eligibility for all of our rental assistance programs. We will conduct family briefings for new applicants. We will administer the project-based voucher program in accordance with HUD guidelines. We will offer and conduct informal hearings for clients being terminated, and we will give the final approval for rental assistance for any. In turn, the family will comply with their family obligations under the project-based voucher program. The family will pay their portion of the rent directly to the landlord. The family will comply with their lease agreement. They will take care of their rental unit, report maintenance problems timely to the landlord, and the family will give proper written notice to move at the end of their lease term if they would like a housing choice voucher to move. And the family will enter into. So just some quick compliance reminders for families being assisted under the project. Remember that appointments with your housing specialist are required. Please don't just show up to see a caseworker. Please always be prompt for scheduled appointments. And if you are late, you can expect that your scheduled appointment will be canceled. Please remember that the family is responsible for reporting all sources of income for every member of the family, including minor children. Any changes in income, either up or down, must be reported in writing within 10 days of the change taking place. Please remember to keep your utilities current at all times, pay your rent on time, and take care of your home. Please remember that a frequent overnight visitor, or anyone who stays in your unit for more than 14 days per calendar year, would be considered an unauthorized occupant, as would anyone that you knowingly allow to use your address for any purpose. And an unauthorized occupant can jeopardize your housing assistance. So please use caution. Think before you act. Be careful of what your visitors do, because you may be held accountable for their actions. And remember that you are always responsible for your success on the program. Next, we are going to talk about portability. Portability does not apply to the project-based voucher program. Portability applies to the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. So if after you have lived in your project-based voucher unit for 1 full year, you could request a Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher to move from your unit. If you request a tenant-based voucher to move, and if the Housing Authority has a voucher available for your family, then you can utilize portability. So portability is a very nice feature of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is a federally funded rental assistance program. There are housing authorities all over the country that are administering this same program. If when your name reaches the top of our waiting list, you are a current resident of McHenry County, if you receive a voucher from the McHenry County Housing Authority, you could take that assistance and immediately move anywhere in the country that you would like to live, as long as there's a housing authority in that jurisdiction that is accepting Section 8. If when your name reaches the top of the waiting list, you are simply working in McHenry County or you are homeless, you must live in McHenry County for at least 1 year. But after that first year, you could also take advantage of portability. So some facts about portability. The housing office where you want to move may have different rules, policies, deadlines, and screening requirements. So the rules of how the program works will pretty much be the same no matter where you go, because it's the same program. But HUD does give housing authorities some latitude on how to run their own program. For example, here in McHenry County, we require that you report all income changes in writing within 10 days of the change taking place, and then we'll adjust your rent up or down to reflect what's actually happening with your family's income. But some other housing authorities, especially in major metropolitan areas, do not require that you report income changes. As far as screening requirements, the McHenry County Housing Authority screens all incoming portability families by looking back on the criminal background 4 years. But some other housing authorities may have a screening requirement of 10 years. So a family may be eligible in McHenry County, but not eligible in another county because something that happened 6 or 7 years ago. The housing authority where you may want to move may have a different payment standard or maximum amount of rental assistance that HUD is willing to give you every month in rent. Again, the payment standard is based off HUD's fair market rent limit for that specific area. The housing office may have a different utility allowance that they will use, which will affect the amount that you pay in rent, and the housing office may issue you a different voucher size. That is not at all uncommon. The voucher size that you are given is dependent on the subsidy standards of whatever housing authority is assisting you. So a single person in McHenry County may be issued a one-bedroom voucher, but if they move to another housing authority, they may be issued a studio voucher. A family living in one jurisdiction may have a four-bedroom voucher, but if they move to McHenry County, based on our subsidy standards, they may be issued a three-bedroom voucher. So the voucher size that you will be given depends on the subsidy standards of the housing authority that will be assisting you. So when you are searching for a place to live, once you have received your housing choice voucher, make sure the unit you are interested in will meet your family's needs. The unit should be close to the schools that you'd like for your children to attend, because again, your children should be registered to school from your assisted unit's address. The unit should be close to where you work or where you would like to work, close to public transportation, close to shopping, and HUD would like to encourage you to live in a low poverty area. Statistically, HUD has found that living in a low poverty area will increase your opportunity for work, have lower crime rates, better school ratings. On average, all of McHenry County is a low poverty area. It is well below the state and the national average for poverty. But there are certain pockets of McHenry County that have a higher than average poverty rate. So in your briefing packet, you will find a map with all the different census tract areas in McHenry County and the poverty rate associated with each census tract. HUD would consider a census tract with less than 10% of the population living in poverty to be a low poverty area. So some tips to locate housing. You can check the classified section of the local newspaper, which in general here in McHenry County would be the Northwest Herald. You can ask friends and neighbors if they know of anything for rent. You can drive through a neighborhood that you like and look for rent signs on buildings or properties. You can check bulletin boards and laundromats and supermarkets, check with a real estate office or a rental agency, but most importantly, you should look online. So landlords have moved mainly to online resources because they're free. They can post pictures and descriptions of their unit. So your caseworker should have a nice listing of different rental websites that you can visit to find online listings. The next thing that we're going to talk about is terminations. So the housing authority does have the right to terminate your housing assistance for something that you have done or something that you have not done that we needed you to do. If we're going to terminate your rental assistance, in general, we will give both you and the landlord a 30-day notice of termination. If you receive a 30-day termination notice, you have two options. One is you can accept the termination and go off the program in bad standing. Or two, you can appeal the decision. If you appeal a termination decision, you are asking for an informal hearing. An informal hearing is a meeting between the housing authority, the family, and a hearing officer is the impartial third party. The family may bring with them anyone that they would like to bring to the hearing. You may have a lawyer present, a family member, a witness, a caseworker. Anyone that you would like to bring is fine. The housing authority will present our side of why we are terminating your housing assistance. The family will then present their side, whatever the situation might be, and the hearing officer's decision is the final decision on whether or not you can retain your housing assistance. Finally, we have a self-quiz. These are some questions that you should be able to answer after going through this Housing Choice Voucher Program briefing. Question 1, how quickly should I report in writing an increase or decrease in my family's income? 2, does driving for Grubhub, selling Avon or Mary Kay, or babysitting for cash count as income? 3, do I need to report or declare if my minor child has a savings account, checking account, or a savings bond? 4, can I let my grandkids stay with me every weekend? 5, can I move someone else into my unit permanently? 6, can I rent an apartment or house that is owned by my parents? 7, do I have to let MCHA inspect my unit? 8, should I let MCHA know if I'm out of town or I'm in the hospital? 9, do I have to pay rent? And if so, who do I pay? And 10, I received an eviction notice. Should I tell MCHA? Answers to the self-quiz. 1, how quickly should I report in writing an increase or decrease in my family's income? Answer, within 10 days. 2, does driving for Grubhub, selling Avon or Mary Kay, or babysitting for cash count as income? Answer, yes. All self-employment income or work for cash should be documented and reported to the McHenry County Housing Authority. Question 3, do I need to report or declare if my minor child has a savings account, checking account, or savings bond? Answer, yes. All assets for assisted family members, including minor children, should be declared. Question 4, can I let my grandkids stay with me every weekend? Answer, no. Clients may have overnight guests for only 14 days per calendar year. Question 5, can I move someone else into my unit permanently? Answer, it is possible to add another family member to your assisted household. If you have a family member that you would like to add to your unit, please contact your caseworker about 2 months prior to that person moving in to start the process. Question 6, can I rent an apartment or a house that is owned by my parents? Answer, HUD does not allow clients to rent a unit from certain family members, including parents, children, grandparents, grandchildren, sisters, or brothers of any member of the assisted family. Question 7, do I have to let MCHA inspect my unit? Answer, yes. Tenants must allow the McHenry County Housing Authority to inspect the unit at a reasonable time and after a reasonable notice. Question 8, should I let MCHA know if I am out of town or I'm in the hospital? Answer, you must contact the Housing Authority if any member of your assisted household is out of the unit for several weeks or more. Question 9, do I have to pay rent? And if so, who do I pay? Answer, tenants will pay 30% of their income towards rent and utilities. You will pay your rent portion directly to your landlord. Please keep a copy of your rent payment or your rent receipt for your own records. And finally, question 10, I received an eviction notice. Should I tell MCHA? Answer, yes. Contact MCHA immediately if you receive an eviction notice from your landlord. Receiving an eviction notice from your landlord does not mean that you will automatically lose your housing assistance. If you have questions or need clarifications regarding this briefing, please contact any of the MCHA staff members listed below. Please also reach out to your assigned caseworker after viewing this briefing to discuss your ongoing eligibility determination and what outstanding documents or consent forms the Housing Authority may still need to complete your application or certification. Thank you for viewing the Housing Choice Voucher Program briefing.